session, let's make this very interactive. So bring all your questions. We're going to introduce the Arcelia team that you will be working with. We're going to go over all the tasks that you're going to be doing within this contribution period, and then what you can expect in the internship. We'll talk about how we work, some communication do's and don'ts, and we'll open the space for questions. So let's make this very interactive, bring all your questions, and let's get right to it. Okay, so as some of you might know, and to those of you who are joining us for the first time, Arcelia is a nonprofit that has the sole aim of equipping laboratories, clinics, educational institutes, especially in the low-income countries, so primarily within the global south, with AI tools for facilitating drug discovery research. Our team is very versatile. We're spread across the globe across several time zones. So, for example, I am in India. Other people who are joining us, for example, Gemma, Mikel are from Spain. Ini, who's also going to be one of your mentors, is from Nigeria. And so, yeah, it's like a very widespread community. We were founded I think it's about 4 years now, in 2020. And the whole USP for Arcelia is not actually a USP, but our whole mission is to make AI easy to use for scientists and people within the biomedical community. So in this internship, you'll primarily be working with the 3 people you can see on the screen and me. So let me introduce everyone one by one. We have Gemma, who is the co-founder and CEO of Arcelia. We have Mikel. He's also the co-founder and lead scientist at Arcelia. And we have Ini, who was a wonderful intern with us in the last Outreachy cohort. And then we have me. I'm Dhanshri. I joined Arcelia as an intern, like some of you, back in 2022. And I've been a contributor since then, and now I'm working at Arcelia in the technology as a CTO. So let's get on to how we want to communicate within the scope, within the duration of this contribution period. And this is a very important part, so please be mindful and ask questions if you have. So within this period, first of all, almost everything that you will need is there in the Gitbook. So it is also the link to the Gitbook is pinned on the general channel in Slack, as a lot of you might already know. So please go read it thoroughly, and then if you have any questions, use the open channels on Slack to ask them. A lot of times, a lot of your peers will also be quicker to answer those questions than the mentors will be. Then comes, and I've already mentioned this about the Slack workspace, but use the open channels as much as you can instead of privately DMing the mentors, your peers, because private DMs, 1, can be sometimes missed, and 2, help will be quicker. You will get help much quicker, if you put questions out in the open. And of course, you'll have a lot more people scrutinizing your work, maybe jumping in to help you out. So make communication as open as possible. Then let's talk about the GitHub issues. So as you can see, we have created a ticket for you to record your contributions during this period. You will use that GitHub issue to record all your contributions that we have divided. We have divided the expectations in 4 weeks of this internship. And the template, as you can see, has all the checkboxes to sort of guide you through into making those contributions. Now, finally, we have all our email IDs on the Arcelia workspace, and there's no reason we would want to keep that information private, but please only use email or email mentors for very specific or urgent issues. Generally, we want you to communicate with us in the open channels on the Slack workspace and on GitHub issues. Okay, how not to communicate with mentors and your peers. We have a zero tolerance policy for disrespectful language. So please be respectful of everyone, everyone's space, everyone's needs. And when you're trying to get help on an issue or on errors, please be very careful about pasting errors with explanations, logs, and not screenshots. They're not very useful, as I've mentioned on Slack for several reasons, but let me reiterate them here. One, it's sometimes people share screenshots as literally clicking a photo of their screen. It's very blurry. Two, you cannot parse a screenshot, so you can't like search for specific things. So, for example, when someone's debugging something, generally you have an idea of what you want to look for in a stack trace. We can't do that in a screenshot. Um, so, absolutely no screenshots. Please paste all your errors and stack traces in log files. Next thing, you have to 1 week where you're confused where to look for the instructions and everything. We understand that. But in like week 2 or week 3,
Dancher is frozen, right? Or is it only me?
if you've not read the instructions, oh,
Dancher, you're freezing
okay.
a bit.
Ini
Okay.
or anyone, are you hearing Dancer interrupted? Because Jim and myself are in the same Wi-Fi network. So okay,
She's
freezing. Yeah.
freezing.
All right. Okay, Dancher. Let's continue maybe, and let's see if
Okay.
that you were fine up to now, so maybe it should be fine.
Okay. Okay. Um, so yeah, I wanted to emphasize that you should try to do stuff before you ask for questions. For example, a lot of the instructions are there in repository readmes, solutions to things if you just simply Google things. And we want to see that, right? Like we want to see the effort that you've put into solving a problem before you like asked for help on it. You can use ChatGPT to like ask for some help with code. Um, Stack Overflow is a great resource, and just like the official Python documentation. The other thing that not nice to do to anyone contribution period, but generally in life or in a workplace for that matter, do not ping people several times before they get back to you.
Dancher is definitely freezing. Dancher, you are.
Especially like
Sorry, I'm interrupting. Dancher,
Oh,
you're
okay.
freezing. I don't know if maybe is there a
let
chance?
me
Let's switch off the video.
switch
Dancer.
my network.
Maybe
Okay,
switch
I
off
can
the
pause the
video.
video. Yeah, let me just. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's try now.
Is this better now? Is this better?
So
Can
far,
you
so
hear
good.
me better,
Yeah.
everyone?
Let's try.
Yeah, let's try like this, Dancher.
Okay, awesome. Awesome, perfect, cool. Let's do that. So yes, another thing that you should not do, and it's not good to do ever to anyone, anywhere, whether that's your workplace or anywhere, or not just within this contribution period, is to not ping people several times for getting an answer. General rule of thumb is do not ping people several times in a span of 24 hours. Like give them the time and space to get back to you. One final thing that we have absolutely a zero tolerance policy for is using AI generated text. And where do you ask you might be using it? In your motivation letters, for example. That you are going to be putting. So please do not use ChatGPT to type up something for you. Just quickly asking Gemma, Mikhail, was that clear? Like the audio? right
Not
now?
perfect, not perfect, but a bit better, I think.
Yeah, let's continue,
How about you
Danshri.
just give me one quick.
Yeah, you
Okay,
wanna
cool.
disconnect and
I
connect?
could try switching my Wi-Fi network. Yeah,
Okay. Okay, let's take 1 minute, everyone.
let me just
Danshri will
quickly
wait
try switching my network.
for you to be back.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Hi everyone. I just want to quickly ask: is my audio any better now?
I think so.
Yeah, it's better.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get started from where we left. Okay, I assume everyone can see my screen?
Yeah, that works, Danshri.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so let's now talk about what you will experience within this contribution period. As you might have already seen, we have the contribution period divided into 4 weeks with specific tasks for each week. Within this first week that has now almost come to an end, you should have joined the Slack channel, which a lot of you have done. You should have looked at the GitHub issue, opened a contribution issue. You should have read the Gitbook instructions clearly and installed the Ursilia Model Hub and also be done or like have written your motivation statement. Um, Now, what we want you to do is at the end of this, if you're still liking the community that Ursilia is and the work that you will be doing, and if you still want to continue participating in this contribution period, you should first and foremost go and record this first contribution on the Outreachy website. Why do we emphasize on doing that is because within Outreach, the framework with which Outreachy works is you need to regularly record some contribution issues and then eventually make a final application. This issue that you will open right now as your first this contribution that you will create right now as your first contribution will not affect like will not actually be the final application. I saw that some people had that confusion on the Slack channel between the first contribution and the final application. When you open this first contribution, it will just be that. It will just be a first contribution. You will be able to submit your final application towards the end of this contribution period. Um, okay, so week one goals. What do we want to get out of this exercise within this week one? We want you to learn about the community, about each other, about your peers. We want to see why you're interested in working at Ursilia. We want you to sit and think about it, which is what should be contained within your motivation letter. And please do not put just 2 lines in there. Please, like, tell us your story. We want to hear you. So put at least 2 paragraphs in there. And finally, which is the most crucial thing, we want you to get familiar with the Ursilia infrastructure. For example, installing the model hub, installing models, working with models, running models, getting prediction outputs, and so on. Now, let's get on to week 2 tasks, which some of you are super excited to already get started with. So, we have finalized a list of 8 models to work for you to work with. Now, what does that work entail? Uh, in this particular task, you will first need to understand what exactly is the model. Like, what is it doing? Is it, for example, predicting some sort of understand what is the model doing? What is the problem that is being formulated with this model? And is this a classification model? Is it a regression model? If there are, if for some of you, if you're not very familiar with machine learning, that is all right. We can go, like, we just really want to see if you're able to learn also during this period. So you can go look up a bunch of tutorials. We can share some tutorials with you over Slack. But really, like, sit and understand what the model is doing. Then you have to create a repository in your account with clear instructions on how to reproduce your work. In Gitbook, I have linked a template repository that Gemma so nicely created. And you will see that within that repository, there are instructions on how to take a data set, how to standardize that data set, clear up that data set, and sort of work with it. Now, the actual work that you're going to have to put in that repository is, in this particular week, 2 things. Checking for model bias against a reference library. Now, what do I mean by this reference library? It means it's just going to be a list of compounds, a list of chemical inputs that ideally the model should not have seen before. And also reproducibility. What is reproducibility? It's literally just that. You're trying to reproduce the results of the model from the publication of the model against a test data set that is mentioned in the publication. So generally, when you see these papers, you will see when someone creates a model like that, they provide data sets that they've worked with, they provide the results that they obtained on those data sets, and we want to see that you're able to actually, we want to basically see if the model is able to reproduce those results or not. And this is actually very crucial within science, because you just don't want to take someone's word for something working. You want to see if it works or not. And finally, we want to see what you think about these results. What do you understand from these results? So you could do that in form of graphs, explanations, they could be bar charts, they could be histograms. For example, a histogram of the distribution of predictions on a reference library. And so the goal essentially from this week is you know how to work with Python. You have some preliminary understanding of data science, which is okay if you don't have it right now, but you could go and actually pick it up during this period. Again, you could understand working with models in the Ercilia Model Hub. You're able to make some sense of these models within the context of biomedicine, because that is largely what you're going to be working with during the entirety of the internship. And we want to see whether you're able to interpret these model predictions and make sense of if they're good, if they're bad, if they're biased towards like predicting some particular kind of outcomes. For example, you might run into models that are only predicting values closer to 0 or values closer to 1 for any kind of data that you throw at it. And we want to see that you're able to make sense of these predictions and not just running a model and calling it. Okay, so within week 3, we will continue where we left off within week 2. And now we will find an external data set, and for which we know experimental results only. We will verify and validate that data set. For example, we will try to see if that data set does not have any data that the model was already trained on. And you might also you might also have to clean up that data set, do some standard pre-processing that you've already covered in week 2. So you will be utilizing all of the skills that you learned, all of the knowledge that you gained in week 2 to continue the tasks in week 3. And then finally, you will run predictions for this data set. Continuing off from week 2, the goals are pretty similar. We want to see whether you've really understood what you're doing with this data set in terms of pre-processing and why it's important, especially within the context of chemistry data. Uh, that could be like generating embeddings for just a given chemical compound, standardizing those embeddings, maybe inspecting those embeddings. We want to see that you understand the performance of the model on the data set, especially because this data set is going to be completely new for the model. And we want to see that you're able to reason about its performance. We don't have to know everything, but we really just want to see that you're able to put in some thought and not just running predictions and being done with it. Now, this will be a very interactive task. So you have to work with your mentors and peers, especially the mentors will support you in picking out these data sets. We can help you make sense of the results that you're getting, but we want to see the initiative from you first. So work with us. Let's make this a very interactive process, and let's learn a lot. Finally, within week 4, we want to dedicate this week entirely for you to submit, to revise your contributions, to submit your application. And we want to highlight that at this point, we will not be providing feedback on your contribution in terms of to like expect more work, because we want you to dedicate this time to just finishing your final application. As you know, we all come from areas with sometimes poor internet connectivity, as you already saw with me in this call. So anything can go wrong. You could lose out electricity, you could lose out your network connection, and you don't want to push this to the last minute, because Outreachy, because we get a huge influx of applicants, and it becomes very difficult for us to advocate with Outreachy to support everyone who could not submit their final application in time. So it is fully your responsibility to do it in time. We will provide you with feedback on your application. For example, the structure of your application, how you are going to be structuring the 12 weeks within this application. We're very happy to do that, but please do not put it to the last minute. Yes, so that is pretty much it. Now I'm opening the space for questions. Anything you want to talk about? I see we already had a hand raised, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so how much chemistry should we know?
Good question. You're not expected to know a lot of it, actually. You're not expected to know anything about chemistry. I mean, maybe like basic high school chemistry, but that is not a very strong obligation. The idea is that you're able to learn, that you're able to ask questions. That is actually what we want to fundamentally focus on. Like, if you don't know something, that's okay. Because we understand while making sense of model predictions with chemistry data requires understanding chemistry. But what's not okay is to just sit with the fact that you don't know chemistry and you're not even asking questions about it. Just bring all your questions, no matter how like they can be very basic, and we'll be more than happy to answer them. In fact, I don't know more than high school chemistry, and that's perfectly fine. But ask questions. Okay, let's.
I want to add something here. Can I add something here, Dansri?
Go ahead, Mikhail, please.
Yeah, because I'm a chemist by training, and for instance, we've been working with INI, and INI has done something called generative chemistry during the Outreachy internship round, the previous one. And I think, INI, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've learned a lot about chemistry, right? And you had no background before starting. So it's absolutely not important that you know chemistry, but I think it's also incentivizing that you might learn some while working with us.
Thanks for the answers. So next in line is Kunga, Derek.
Okay, hello everyone. I have this question. If more than the required number of interns make it to the final application, how would you or Outreachy select the best, or would you accommodate everyone?
Chairman, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, no, unfortunately, we cannot accommodate everyone because Outreachy internships are paid and there is a number of spaces allocated to each organization. So in this round, we have secured 2 spots. And as Danshu said, we choose the interns based on all the contribution period, which is why it's there for. So making it to the end of all the contributions doesn't guarantee a space in outreach in the program, as it doesn't guarantee either a space if you it doesn't mean that you cannot still apply if you haven't completed all the tasks. We take into account your skills, we take into account your communication, we take into account your motivation, we take into account your real interest in working with us, and how can this have a positive impact in your career. So we take the whole contribution period as reference to select interns at the end.
I agree. And basically this is why the contribution period exists, because it's different from just submitting an application for us to decide on based on it's the contribution period exists so that we can get to know you, so that we can get to see how you work with us, how we work with you, and we can establish that relationship that we can take forward in the actual internship. So utilize this time the best you can.
Okay, so next question is from Sidi.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Firstly, thank you for having this call, and it was really nice seeing all of you. My question is related to one of the tasks in the week 2. It's mentioned that we have to select a list of 1,000 molecules from public repositories. So I'm just a bit confused that we have to do that. We have to curate that ourselves, or is it somewhere in the Urcelia repository and we have to look for that? So that is I'm not able to understand.
I think you're talking. Let me just. I think for the 1,000 molecules, I think it's going to be a reference library that. No, it is going to be a reference library that we will provide. In the final stage of checking for model performance, that is task 3. That is where we will have to curate a data set, which is more of going to be a collaborative task that you will do with the mentors, where we'll support you. But for task 1 and 2, we will provide a reference library.
All right, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Are we providing the reference library entry now? I don't think so. I think we decided they should look for it. Anyway, we'll clarify that on the Gitbook. No worries.
Yeah.
It will be clear for next week. Yeah. Okay, next question is from Ashita, if I'm pronouncing that right. Ashita? Is that the right way to pronounce the name?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Am I audible?
Your audio
Yes,
doesn't work super well. You can also type the question in the chat if you prefer.
No, I'll just do it this way. I wanted to ask, when we are asking for feedback for the final application, do we have to share it on the Slack channel itself?
Yes, that's a good question. Generally, what we do is, so if you go into the Gitbook for week 4, you will see that we have attached a template for you to work off of. Now, what we expect you to do is create a Word, like a Google document, based on that template. That template is only for 8 weeks. You will have to basically use it as an inspiration and create a 12-week breakdown, which is how long the Outreachy internship runs for, and then share that Google Doc with the mentors over DM. Generally, because I will be doing most of the coordinating for this particular cohort, you can send your documents to me, and I'll be happy to review them over the DM, like in the Google Doc that you create.
If I can add to this, Danshri, please do that very well in advance. No feedback will be provided the day before or 2 days before the application period concludes, because we cannot have the capacity to answer in such short notice. And share to make it easy done, paste the files, open a Google document, and share it with the mentor that they can see and edit it. Okay, that's very important, because it's much easier for us to work online than
Okay,
with
sure.
like copied documents. Okay, next question is from Talika.
Hello everyone, and happy Women's Day to all those who are here. So I want to ask you that are there any opportunities, like if I really wanted to do research in chemistry, like AI in chemistry or chemistry in AI, that kind of thing? Are there any opportunities other than outreach internship to collaborate with you, or either whether I can work on your models, or I can take help from your models for my personal research?
Um, I guess Mikkel or Gemma.
Sorry, I didn't really hear very well, so can you ask the question again or summarize it?
Uh, if I could not able to got this internship, whether if for my research in chemistry and AI, whether I can take your models, or whether I can use them for my personal
Yes.
research.
Ercilia models are all open source, licensed mostly under GPL3 licenses, so anyone can use them, certainly. You only need to cite where they come from. So Ercilia, if you run them through Ercilia and you use them, you should cite Ercilia and the original model contributors. Yeah. Okay, next in line. Sorry, so there is a bit of a parallel conversation in chat and in questions, so we are gonna try and put some order to it. So let's first take the questions of raised hands, and then we'll try to quickly answer the questions on the chat, just because so that everyone listens to all the information. So I would say King George, then Prakriti, then Ashita again, and then the questions in the chat. Okay. So King George.
Okay, hello everyone. My question was similar to the previous one. I just wanted to know if it's possible to continue with the contributions and working on the project even if one is not selected for the internship.
Yes, thanks for this question. I answered that, Danshris, it's fine.
Yeah. Go for it.
Thanks for this question. So unfortunately at Ercilia we have a very limited capacity, so we cannot provide support for contributions outside the official internship programs. So we hopefully in the future have the capacity to welcome more open source contributors natively that have not been engaged in Ercilia with like student opportunities, internships, or so on. But at this moment, we cannot support contributors outside those programs just because we are a very small organization and don't have the capacity for that. But hopefully in the not so far future, we'll be able to do so. Yeah. Okay. Next question from Prakriti, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Hello everyone, hello mentors. So my question is that it's mentioned that we have to select one of the models from the 8 models. So are these 8 models the one that you have provided in the papers channel?
Yes, these are the same models that have been provided in the papers channel. If you go see the Gitbook, the list is mentioned there, and also the template repository that I referred to earlier is also linked there. And because generally it is sometimes hard for people to find papers because some papers are behind like a paywall and you need institutional access. To make things easier, we provided papers for each of the models in the papers channel on Slack.
All right, so we have to implement the model and also go through that research papers for week 2.
You have to pick a single model. Ideally, it is good if you start with reading the paper and try to implement the model from the source code that the authors have provided. and then take your then get the predictions from there, and then finally compare it with the model that is already implemented in Ercilia Model Hub.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I needed this clarification.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So no one else has a hand raised. Danshi, do you want me to read out some of the questions on... Okay, Ashita, first let me take the questions from the chat. I'll read out the questions and then Danshi, you can answer them. You've answered some of them, but just to be clear, sounds good?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, so questions in the chat are... Okay, we'll share the slides. That's not a question. Okay, reproducibility and bias of models. Maybe Danshi, you can make a quick comment on that, but that's well explained in everywhere else. Yeah.
Okay, so what do we mean by reproducibility? You take a model and you see that when you read a paper for this particular model in question, whichever model you pick, you would generally see some fancy tables that the authors have created, stating things like, hey, our model got this percentage accuracy on this particular data set, or our model had this ROC value, or like AUC, ROC value. If you don't know about it, you can go look it up. And now what do? Do you just stop there? Or do you just take the author's word for it? Generally, no, because that's not how science works. You want to validate that it's actually true. So what you would do is you would take the model that the authors have. In some cases, the authors would have provided a model. Generally, we've tried to select models that the authors have provided checkpoints for or model weights for. And what you would do is you would try to run that model as per the instructions given by the authors, and you would actually run that model on the data set that the authors have provided that fancy table for, and see that you're actually getting those values. So in this way, you're reproducing the results of the model and seeing that they actually align with that. And so that tackles reproducibility. Now, what about bias? So, okay, the authors trained the model on some data set that they saw that the model was working well with, and they think that all is well with the world. Do you stop there? Again, no, you don't stop there, because in the real world, when you're trying to use machine learning models to actually work for real life scenarios, for example, in this case, like drug discovery, which is very crucial, right? You don't want just random drugs that maybe one model, you basically don't want to base your decision to take like a drug to market or develop a drug based on the predictions from one model, especially if you can't tell that the model generalizes well or not. So in that case, you throw more data at the model, data that the model has not seen, data that the authors did not work with initially. So it's not even in the test data set, for example, that the authors provided. And you want to see whether the model is biased towards some certain predictions for this new data that you're throwing at the model. Is it always giving like negative values? If, for example, if it's a classification problem, is it always thinking that the data is belonging to a negative class, or is it always thinking that the data is belonging to a positive class? So you basically want to see that the model generalizes well, and generalizes well to pretty much any data that you can give the model. And that is what makes like a good machine learning model, essentially. So those are what bias and reproducibility concepts are.
Yes, thanks, Angie, for that. If I can add into that, this is exactly what you are supposed to be focusing on during these weeks to try to understand these concepts better. So I encourage you all to read. There is a ton of information about machine learning out there. So just try to go and read a bit more, as Danshi has very nicely explained. Okay. Right, more questions. As we already said, I'll take this one, Danshi, just quickly. Selections are based on the quality of work or communication, overalls the quality of the contribution. So there is as I already said, mentors meet and decide, taking into account everything. So there is not a single thing that stands out than others, okay? So we take everything into account We are not. I'm not able to tell you whether the quality of work will be over communications or contributions. It's a whole holistic experience that we try to take into account. Okay. So I'll go over to. I'll leave the more technical questions that are not really related to like the community and so on. Technical questions like what type of plots are we supposed to generate? Guys, there is information on Gitbook. This is more a discussion for you to go and find out, look at the papers. So first do this work. We cannot, and there is a, I would encourage you to go and check the template repository that is already out there with all this explained just for the sake of time. Danji, next question. Do we get answers to our questions from mentors during the weekends?
Generally, the mentors would communicate with you beforehand when they're going to be available to review your contributions. So, and that is the practice we've been following so far. We would tell you, like, usually a day in advance that, hey, the next day I'm setting aside this much time to review your contributions. And that is when you can expect to receive comments and answers from us.
Thanks. There could be a source where one can continue getting such papers with open access even after the contribution period as a mechanism of promoting the Ercilia Hub model. So the Ercilia Model Hub is always there. I'll answer this quickly, Danchi, if that's fine. The Ercilia Model Hub is always there. It's open. The publications are not open access. In some cases, there is nothing that we can do around this. There is a paywall. We currently don't have any subscriptions, so we rely on our collaborators to send us the papers. There are some options out there that are providing access to these papers, kind of outside the legal framework. And there is also the possibility of finding them on the repositories like bioRxiv, arXiv, and those kind of preprint repositories. And there is always the possibility of you asking the authors to send you the paper if there is a publication that you cannot access. So I hope this answer the question. Okay, so just to finish up and have enough time for the questions that raise their hands, as I said, we are not gonna answer questions that are explained very clearly in the documentation, like what do we do in our first contribution, where do we submit our motivation letter. All this is clear in the documentation, so please go and read there before we answer those. These are all questions that are really explained well in the Ercilia documentation, so I encourage you to go there. I'll open the floor again for the people that raise their hand and let Danshri answer those questions maybe. So first person in the queue is Ashita.
Sorry, I forgot to ask this last time, but when you said you cannot use generative AI, does it mean we cannot use any patch of code from the internet and we have to write everything from scratch?
Okay, that's a good question. Personally, like, I don't see a difference between using code from like generative AI to assist yourself with coding or copy pasting stuff from Stack Overflow. See, at the end of the day, you should understand what code you've written, right? And it should make sense to you, and you should be able to own it and debug it when the issue comes, because that's the thing, right? Like, Copilot or ChatGPT could give you a completely wrong answer, and you've written like a 50-line function, and now you don't know where things went wrong. So it's more like buyer beware kind of a situation. So you can use code from it, you can take help from it, but be sure that you understand what's happening.
Okay, thank you so much.
But what we do specifically want to highlight is we do not want to see you copy pasting your motivation letter, to be very, very specific, from ChatGPT or the sorts.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And next question is from Adityan, if I'm pronouncing this right.
Yeah. Okay. So apart from the main tasks written in that book, what else we can do extra to increase our chances?
Okay, great question. If you're very you're welcome to start. I mean, if you're very quick in finishing up your week 2 and week 3 tasks, uh, there is nothing stopping you from picking up another model if you want to work on it, or helping out your peers, um, or plotting, making more plots, like really explaining the work that you've done, and it doesn't have to be like a single plot. You can attack that problem from any kind of angle. So it's pretty open in that way if you're able to complete all the tasks before sooner than the deadline.
Thanks, Danshi, for that. I
Yeah,
would
thanks.
add to that.
Gemma, one more.
Let me add to this. There is always improvements in the quality of the work you're doing. We've left it very open-ended. So I would suggest to you really go deep into the models that you've chosen and improve on your task and then help your peers rather than trying to open up new tasks. It's only 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. So yeah, focus on what you're doing. You don't need to go over the sky, just make a solid contribution to the internship. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Also, Gemma, can we after if we don't get selected, can we just contribute to the repo without the support? Even if we don't get selected, we can continue contributing.
Nancy, you want to answer that again?
Yeah, so this question has been answered before. Generally, right now, we do not have the capacity to support external contributions, but we are planning to move in that direction where we can support that in the future. But just for now, that's not possible.
Like support in the sense?
In the sense, yes, like when you will try making contributions to the Ercilia Model Hub, for that matter, you will have a lot of questions because it's a large code base, right? And we are in the process of documenting it really well so that we can have external contributors anytime and they can take up issues more autonomously. But right now we don't have that sort of an infrastructure in place to support external contributors, like in terms of explaining the structure of the code, making issues more open. It should be there, yes.
Okay, so last question because time is running up. So Rhea, over to you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ria. So my question was, so basically you talked about, reproducing the models and finding the biases and reproducibility data and creating, histograms, etc. regarding them. So do we store this data and share that with you as mentors and share our, what we've done in the first issue that we created itself?
Okay, so in terms of what you exactly put out on GitHub, I think that's a good question. I think it needs more clarity. The only issue that you will be creating on GitHub is the contribution issue that we have a template for. For sharing this work with us, you will be creating a repository. And here is where you will put all your plots, all your figures, all your notebooks. You will very thoroughly update the README in clarifying the project structure, the repository structure, steps to reproduce, and you can link that repository in your issue. Like, don't post everything that you've done directly in the issue. Keep it in the repository because that is easier to run because you can't expect someone to go and copy things from your issue to try to run it, right? It's easier if you clone a repository. So keep everything in the repository, link that in the issue.
Yeah, got it. Yep, repos. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. We don't have more questions, Andrew, so you can wrap up maybe.
Awesome. Cool. Just a quick shout out, I've created a resources channel on the Slack workspace where feel free to share documentation, technical resources with each other and tutorials, etc. So make use of Slack. That's all. Anyway, I hope it was a useful session for everyone who came. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. And I'll be reviewing your contributions in about 5 minutes from now. And yeah, Thanks, everyone. I think we can. End it here.
Thanks, Danshi. Really nice. Thanks for the meeting. So let's remember that you can always communicate with us on Slack if we didn't answer your questions or you have more. Let's use those channels. Thank you so much for your time and Danshi for putting all of these amazing explanations together.